We do have a big show tonight. As Chris said, Senator Elizabeth Warren is going to be here live in studio in just a moment. We had Senator Kamala Harris here last night. We've got Senator Warren here tonight. Lots to ask Senator Warren tonight after her very, very, very large rally in New York City last night. This was quite possibly the biggest rally of the Democratic campaign so far this year. Senator Warren will be joining us here in studio a momentito. She's joining us on a day when the Democratic-controlled Congress held its first public hearing under the new rules it adopted last week, setting out the parameters of its impeachment inquiry into President Trump, which makes today a particularly good day to have a Democratic presidential frontrunner here on the set. This was a dramatic day. The witness list for today's hearing, again, the first hearing in the impeachment inquiry into Trump, called for 3 people to testify today. The first was Corey Lewandowski, one of the president's campaign managers, the one who was fired and replaced by Paul Manafort, who is now in prison. The committee also asked for former White House Deputy Chief of Staff Rick Dearborn to be there, and for former White House Staff Secretary Rob Porter to be there. Both Dearborn and Porter featured multiple times in Robert Mueller's report. They were either, according to Mueller, involved in or witnessed what Mueller described as potentially criminally obstructive behavior by President Trump. Now, just as the White House has instructed major witnesses, including former White House counsel Don McGahn, that they should not comply with congressional subpoenas, they should not show up and testify, last night in this letter, the Trump White House, naturally, ordered both Rick Dearborn and Rob Porter that they, too, should not appear today to testify, despite their subpoenas from Congress. That letter says they can ignore the subpoena because of something the Trump White House is calling constitutional immunity, which is something they've sort of invented. I mean, in this case, it means nobody who ever worked in the Trump White House can ever be allowed to testify on any subject, no matter what. That argument was immediately rejected from the outset by the committee chairman, Jerry Nadler.
We subpoenaed 3 witnesses to this hearing, Rick Dearborn, Robert Porter, and Corey Lewandowski. Unfortunately, we learned last night that the White House is blocking the first 2 from even showing up and tightly limiting the third. The White House has no authority, legal or otherwise, to give these orders. They claim Porter and Dearborn, like McGahn, are absolutely immune from testifying before Congress. There is no such thing. The only court ever to consider this purported absolute immunity doctrine totally rejected it.
The only court to ever consider this absolute immunity doctrine that the Trump administration is trying here totally rejected that argument. Well, despite that from the committee chairman and the implicit threat of court action to back that up, Rob Porter and Rick Dearborn, who both worked at the White House, they did not show up there today. Trump's campaign manager, Corey Lewandowski, was there, flanked by 2 empty chairs with Dearborn's and Porter's names in front of them. Even though Corey Lewandowski never worked in the White House at all, he did today, after he showed up, try to claim some sort of legal authority, some sort of legal reference for himself, refusing to answer questions from the committee that he didn't want to answer. And I will tell you, I'll sort of give you this, I'll give you the spoiler here. Honestly, the second part of the day with Corey Lewandowski got way better and way more dramatic, and they got tons more out of him. But because of him trying to sort of cite a legal authority of some side for why he didn't have to answer their questions, this is what the first half of the day generally looked like.
Are you refusing to answer, Mr. Lewandowski?
No, Congressman. As I've explained in a letter from the White House dated September 16, 2019, to my attorney,
Mr. Lewandowski, that letter...
Mr. Lewandowski's conversation with the president and with senior advisors to the president protected from disclosure.
We stop the clock again for this obstructive behavior.
The White House is directed not to disclose the substance of any discussion with the president. I can't comment on private conversations. Okay, the White House is directed not disclose the substance of any discussions with the president. I can read you the exact statement again if you'd like me to. I said the White House is directed that I not disclose the substance of any discussions with the president. I can't discuss a private conversation with the president that isn't in the report, sir. The White House has directed me that I not disclose the substance of any conversations with the president. Again, the White House has directed not to disclose the substance of any discussions with the president. Again, at the advice of White House counsel, I can't answer questions that would be privileged, and I respect that privilege.
That's how much of the first half of the hearing played out. That said, despite that attitude and that sort of angle on the questioning, Mr. Lewandowski did find himself today in the first half of the hearing basically confirming the details of one of the central episodes of potentially criminal obstruction that was laid out against the president in Robert Mueller's report. An incident that reportedly happened in June 2017 when Lewandowski was asked directly by the president to deliver a message to Attorney General Jeff Sessions. The message was that Sessions should tell special counsel Robert Mueller that Mueller could no longer investigate the Trump campaign or the 2016 election. He instead had to limit his investigation to elections in the future, to crimes, in other words, that had not yet occurred. The president also told Corey Lewandowski that if Jeff Sessions refused to meet with him to receive this very important message, then Corey Lewandowski, who was not a White House employee, should nevertheless take it upon himself to fire the attorney general. If just rando civilians had the power to fire the attorney general, who among us would not have fired one or two over the course of an average lifetime, right? I mean, I hereby retroactively fire Ed Meese. Ed Meese, be gone. You were terrible. Goodbye, John Mitchell. I fire you too. I'm a citizen. What if we could do that? It's ridiculous. I mean, it's very satisfying in some instances to imagine this, but regardless, this is what the president reportedly told Corey Lewandowski he was empowering him to do. As Mueller puts it in his report, Lewandowski met one-on-one with President Trump in the Oval Office in June 2017, whereupon the president, quote, dictated a message to be delivered to Attorney General Sessions that would have had the effect of limiting the Russia investigation to future election interference only. That's what Lewandowski told the FBI, and that is what ended up in the Mueller report. Well, here's Corey Lewandowski today, under oath, not quite knowing what to say about that now.
Didn't you think it was a little strange that the president would sit down with you one-on-one and ask you to do something that you knew was against the law? Did that strike you as strange? You didn't think it would have been illegal for you to ask Mr. Sessions to drop the investigation and to just go on to future presidents and omit everything with this president?
I didn't think the president asked me to do anything illegal.
He gave you dictation. He dictated to you a message to give Sessions. Had you ever been a secretary for the president before and taken dictation or shorthand?
Many times.
Many times. Ooh, nailed it. Yeah, I took notes for the president many times. Problem with that answer, because what Corey Lewandowski told the FBI about that was the exact opposite. Quote, this was the first time the president had asked Corey Lewandowski to take dictation, and Lewandowski wrote as fast as possible to make sure he captured the content correctly. The source of that sentence from the Robert Mueller report is Corey Lewandowski's own 302, his own interview with the FBI.
Okay. Now, you stated earlier today that President Trump asked you to take down dictation, quote, many times. Is that correct?
It is.
But on page 91, volume 2 of the Mueller report, it states, quote, the president then asked Lewandowski to deliver a message to Sessions and said, quote, write this down, close quote. This was the first time the president had asked Lewandowski to take direct dictation. The first time.
Those are not my words, Congressman. Those are the investigators' words.
Right. Did you lie to Bob Mueller, or are you lying to us?
I didn't lie.
Okay. You're not really here to tell the truth. You are here to participate in a continuing cover-up.
Now, if he did tell the FBI, that was the first time the president had ever told him to write something down. And then he said today under oath, oh, I had been told to write things down, taken dictation from the president many times. This is a totally normal. I mean, being under oath to Congress and being under oath to the FBI, you can't tell different stories without criminally lying in one of those circumstances. Now, I mentioned that today's hearing was the first conducted under new rules adopted by the Judiciary Committee last week to essentially set the parameters for their impeachment investigation of the president. This was the first hearing under those parameters. Well, one of those new rules adopted by the committee last week gave the committee the ability to have committee staff lawyers ask questions of witnesses in addition to questions being asked by members themselves. So yeah, members of Congress all want their 5 minutes. But in addition to that, under these new rules, staff lawyers get to ask too. And that's really important. And we knew that was going to be really important when they agreed to that. We got to see it in action today, because when the staff lawyers started asking questions of Lewandowski, that's where it really got good. I mean, hello, congressional committees. This is unsolicited advice here, but Professional staff are better asking questions in 30-minute uninterrupted blocks than you all are in 5-minute increments where you ping-pong back and forth all the different members of the committee. Therefore, you should do the staff questioning part first, or at least at a very convenient time to be covered on TV. If you did that first, then all of you individual members of Congress could follow up yourselves with your 5-minute questions thereafter. It's a lot more cogent and easy to follow when it's staff lawyers doing the questioning in an uninterrupted way. Start with that. How about that? Just a thought. Free advice. I'll take the change. Anyway, so the back half of the Corey Lewandowski hearing, the first half is him answering questions from all the committee members. Back half of the hearing is him answering questions from a lawyer who is working for the committee. And from the point of view of what the committee was getting at, that part went comparatively well. For example, in no time at all, the committee staff lawyer got Corey Lewandowski to admit that he had lied in an interview earlier this year when Lewandowski said he couldn't recall any conversation he had with the president about Jeff Sessions. The staff lawyer actually played Lewandowski this clip of that TV interview in the hearing room today. It was an interview with Ari Melber here on MSNBC. I'm actually going to play it to you the way it appeared on TV, because when he played it in the hearing room today, it was a little hard to follow what it was. But this was the actual interview that was played today in the hearing room.
I don't ever remember the president ever asking me to get involved with Jeff Sessions or the Department of Justice in any way, shape, or form ever.
I don't remember the president ever asking me to get involved with Jeff Sessions or the Department of Justice in any way, shape, or form ever. So that's Corey Lewandowski earlier this year. That was February this year. That's 2 months before the special counsel's report comes out. So today in the hearing, the staff lawyer played that clip to Corey Lewandowski, played it so everybody else in the hearing room could hear it, and then the lawyer resumed his questioning.
That wasn't true, was it, sir?
I heard that.
And that was not true, was it?
I have no obligation to be honest with the media because they're just as dishonest as anybody else.
So you're admitting, sir, you were not being truthful in that clip, correct?
My interview with Ari Melber?
Yes.
Can be interpreted any way you'd like.
It is true in May 2019. You absolutely remembered when the president asked you to deliver a message to the Attorney General of a speech for him to give related to the special counsel investigation. Isn't that correct?
I'd have to think about it.
Are you claiming, sir, that, and you had been interviewed by the special counsel about those very events in which you discussed and you said was accurately reported in the report a year earlier? Are you saying, sir, you may have forgotten it by the time you were interviewed just before the report was publicly released?
I'm saying my memory was clearly much fresher when I actually gave the interview with the special counsel's report.
Sir, is it your testimony before this committee that when you said you did not remember the president ever asking you to get involved with Jeff Sessions or the Department of Justice, you were saying you were being truthful? And sir, I don't believe there's any reason to consult with your counsel. The question is, are you a truth teller in that interview?
I'm a truth teller every time I stand before Congress or a committee of jurisdiction and raise my hand and swear to God under oath.
My question, sir, is when you said the president never asked you to get involved with Mr. Sessions.
I have no obligation to have a candid conversation with the media whatsoever, just like they have no obligation to cover me honestly, and they do it inaccurately all the time.
So you're admitting that on national television you were lying there.
What I'm saying is they have been inaccurate on many occasions, and perhaps I was inaccurate at that time.
Also, I'd please like you to elect me to the Senate, because I'm awesome. That same staff lawyer for the committee also got Corey Lewandowski to expand on the obstruction incident in question from the Mueller report, which is about what this discussion was about, and how, rather than carry out the president's order, Corey Lewandowski instead decided to delegate it to somebody else, specifically to Deputy White House Chief of Staff Rick Dearborn, who was one of the two absent witnesses at today's hearing, represented by an empty chair with his name placard in front of it.
Why didn't you deliver the message that the president asked you to deliver it unless you didn't deliver it because you knew it was improper to deliver?
Mr. Burke, it wasn't a priority.
So let me ask you, sir, if it wasn't a priority for you to deliver the message, why did you enlist Mr. Dearborn to deliver the message for the president?
Again, I can't speak to private conversations I would have had with Mr. Dearborn at the advice of counsel.
Not asking private conversations. The fact that you did it is already disclosed in the report. I'm asking you, why did you do it? Why? What's going on?
I knew Mr. Dearborn.
Why did you do it?
Can I answer now?
Please.
Okay, I've known Mr. Dearborn since his tenure as the Chief of Staff to Senator Sessions. He was my primary point of contact for Jeff Sessions during the Trump campaign. And I also knew that Mr. Dearborn had continued, like I did, to have a long-standing relationship with Jeff. And if I wasn't going to be seeing Jeff, I figured Rick would be able to deliver that message.
Rick Dearborn never delivered that message because, as he told the FBI for the special counsel's report, doing so made him feel uncomfortable. That's understandable because it was arguably criminal obstruction of justice by the president that the president was asking Corey Lewandowski to carry out. Corey Lewandowski didn't want to do it and so asked Rick to do it instead. And no, Rick didn't want to do it either. So, although there were both proverbial dogs and ponies at this dog and pony show today, and Corey Lewandowski did spend much of the first half of this afternoon's hearing insulting Democratic members of Congress and praising the president's brilliance and decrying the fake Russia narrative and repeating the standard Trump line of no conspiracy, no collusion. In the end, Corey Lewandowski, the president's campaign manager, did have to admit under oath, under direct questioning, that, yeah, actually everything in the Mueller report, as far as he's concerned, is accurate.
You see where this says, you were asked about it, the special counsel concluded that taken together, the president and his campaign, the purpose of the message was to have you tell the attorney general to move forward with investigating election meddling for future elections. Do you have any basis to dispute that conclusion by the special counsel in his report, sir, about your conduct?
Again, I've answered this question. It hasn't answered.
I would ask you to answer it, sir.
Gentleman will answer the question whether he's answered it before or not.
I have stated, to the best of my knowledge, most of the information in the Mueller report is accurate.
Oh, the Mueller report is accurate, says the president's campaign manager, who admits to playing a role in attempted obstruction of justice, also implicating White House Deputy Chief of Staff in that attempted obstruction of justice. That Deputy White House Chief of Staff is now defying a subpoena and refusing to testify. And so that is what happened in the House Judiciary Committee, with the help of some new rules allowing its lawyers to do the questioning. All future hearings under this impeachment inquiry will be conducted under those same rules. I think we can expect that the relevant committees here, the Judiciary Committee and the House in particular, will probably get that maybe they should put their staff questioning on blast and let committee members follow up, but we shall see.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.